The introduction, it felt like rage bait.
It really did.
I think I might even say right now, this is the all-time favorite chapter of everything we've read so far for me.
Interesting.
Welcome to Archaeology Books for Fun, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. I'm your host, Tristan Herenstein. With me, as always, is my co-host, Barbara Clark.
Hello, everybody.
And today, we are diving into a brand new book titled Finders Keepers, A Tale of Archaeological Plunder and Obsession by Craig Childs. But before we do that, we have a little housekeeping to do. As per usual, on whatever platform you are listening to this or watching this, please consider leaving us a review, a like, subscribe, a comment. We really like doing this podcast, and we're constantly thrilled that people also seem to be enjoying it and listening to it. So we would really, really like to hear back from you. If you want to give back to us a little bit, that would be a fantastic thing to get, is to hear from you all and hear your thoughts. Also, if you are willing and able, there will be a link in the episode description to a donation page. If you would like to support what we do here and archaeology and science education here in Florida, we would very much appreciate anything that you think you can offer us. And as far as today's episode, you may have noticed that this is a little bit shorter than you may have seen on previous ones. So what we are doing for this book, at least, we're giving it a try, is we are going to split our usual hour-long episode into two separate episodes. So you'll be getting the next part in the middle of the month, and you'll be getting the same amount of this podcast every month. It'll just be split up into a couple smaller sections for you. So today we are talking about just the first part of this book. It's broken into 4 parts, which is convenient for us.
Right.
And so if you recall from last time, we talked about getting started with this book a little bit, and we noted there were some opinions about it. And we've run into that before, where the professionals maybe didn't like a book. And so we looked into it and like, well, maybe they're just being too academic about it. Their expectations are too high. In the past, we have found that they were typically right on, which is to say we are talking about specifically The Lost City of the Monkey God here. The one that we really have not liked out of all the books we've read.
Yeah.
And we kind of keep bringing it up because we keep comparing it to other books we're reading. I will say that even with some of those reviews and our doubts about, where they're coming from, I always try to come into this with an open mind. And I want the book to be good. As you may have heard, even though you may enjoy listening to it, we don't necessarily enjoy reading a book we don't like.
Shocker, right?
Right. So we're always hoping for a good book. And so let's dive in and kind of see how this one goes. We start off with an introduction, and I'm already having problems.
Yes, I remember I started reading this, I think, before you, but we were sitting together outside, and I was like, Tristan, I don't think we're going to like this book. Like, that was my first impression of it, just based on the introduction alone.
It starts with an interview with a field archaeologist after she's been on a project, and it's just really weird. It describes the project as a hedonistic foray into the land of the dead, because lots of sex and drinking and everything. And
right.
I'm like, so yes, those things do go on projects, but not all projects. And it's weird that this is being set up like this is archaeology.
Yeah, I feel it was, well, number one, you and I have both done this particular type of work, the cultural resource management field work that this young woman did that he was interviewing. And I don't like the way it presents field archaeologists. They are professionals. They take a certain amount of pride in their job. And just like anybody else, yes, they might do things outside of their work that doesn't really have anything to do with their work. And like you said, it doesn't happen as often as I think this kind of makes it seem. Right. So I didn't like the taste it put in my mouth, really.
No. And we've talked before about problems in archaeology with drinking and smoking. And some of this at least is related to the same thing. You've been working all day, you're off work in the evening. What are you going to do? and some people like to party.
Yeah.
And it is not how everybody does it. So just be aware of that, folks at home.
And it's a hard job. You're out in the elements all day for days on end. You're away from your family if you have one. You're living in hotel rooms.
And people look at like the amount of dirt moved and it's like, oh, it doesn't look that hard, but it's such a controlled stamina, basically. And you're not just chucking stuff out. That's almost physically easier than the shovel skimming they're typically doing, or being on your hands and knees all day long, which I've had a few like that. It's more physically demanding than people realize.
Right.
And the weather and everything else. But there's a comment towards the end. They mentioned finding recent bodies on the project, which can happen. And then there's a quote. Apparently she said, time grew thin for her as if she could see through it. I'm like, what?
It was just very like ethereal. I don't know. It was weird.
It was
I was
weird.
like,
Wonder
I've
if she's
never
still drunk.
felt like weird. Like, I don't know who he was interviewing. I hope she's doing okay.
I've never lost my sense of time on a project.
You do your job and then you go back to your hotel room or whatever. Like it's a like.
And he portrays archaeologists later in the book, and that's a lot more reasonable, I think. I don't know why. This is just strange.
It was a very weird way to open up the book.
Yeah. And then he says, we're going to talk about the underbelly of archaeology. And, who is the looters? Everyone thinks someone else is a looter. And I noted, like, I never heard a museum having to repatriate claim that they're being looted. And if they do, too dang bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was just really strange. I noted some extremely dramatic foreshadowing without writing out exactly what it was, just because, like, oh no. He says archaeologists secret things away to never be seen again.
And that's something that, first of all, really bothers me because it's not true. But it's something we hear all the time when talking to people who may or may not be collectors, but, that we run into at festivals or after lectures or something like that. And there's this idea out there that archaeologists want to keep all the stuff, all the things for themselves.
Right.
And I feel like you and I do a pretty good job of kind of combating that. But again, it's not about the things.
It's a tired argument.
It really is.
We're tired of hearing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of honestly a little insulting. I did not become an archaeologist for the things. I became an archaeologist because I was interested in learning about people. And so to say that I, as a professional archaeologist, just want to collect the things, that's not true at all. If you go to my house, guess what? There is not a single artifact in my house. It's not something I'm interested in. I want to know about the people that made them and used them and even cultures that exist today. So to say that to an archaeologist, I just think is a little insulting, and it really speaks to the person saying it more than the archaeologist. Like, you don't understand what archaeology is.
And then there's an interesting little story where he tells how he was gifted a item from someone who looted it from a burial. And this is a little maybe more accurate foreshadowing for the book, because he does a pretty good job of representing what this means to that person, but saying that he felt still very grossed out by it. He did not want this thing.
Yeah.
But then he says, but I've dug burials as part of an archaeological investigation. And he literally says he's not doing this for his own sake. So we're inclined to say it's right and the looter's wrong. But why do we say archaeology is right and looting is wrong? And you just partly answered the question.
Right, yeah.
It's because you're not doing it for yourself. That's not the whole answer, but it's so weird to answer the question
before you ask it.
Yeah, then ask it like you didn't just answer it. Like he's playing Jeopardy here or something.
Yeah. And he has this kind of idea that we all want a piece of everything and we all just want to touch and grab at things like we're little toddlers. Like, that's the way it kind of comes off. If that was the case, we'd all be robbing stores and we'd all, you know what I'm saying? It's just this weird mentality of archaeology only exists because we want to touch things or hold things. So at the beginning, during the introduction, I was worried. I was like, oh gosh, does this guy even really understand what archaeology is?
I was dead set against this book from the first part.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then chapter 1 starts, and we'll get into it, but I'm enjoying this more than I thought. I'll say right now.
I go back and forth.
This definitely has moments, but so let's get into it though.
Yeah.
He starts off with a story, and I was like, oh gosh, because we've had a couple books that like to tell stories and they don't have any point, they don't connect to anything they're trying to say, or they're very tangentially so. I've actually been extremely impressed with his stories. Like, they are always helping him explain an idea.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're very on point and they're well told.
And I like that in most cases, it's kind of the conclusion or the, your emotions that are brought on by that story are kind of almost in conflict, or it really makes you think.
Yeah, and I think that's his point I'm picking up from this, is he's not here with the answers for us necessarily. He is here with his kind of conflicting ideas and trying to explore these ideas.
Yeah.
And then it's like, this is fantastic. So we start off with him as a kid, and he'd go hunting with his dad, and they'd find a site, and they would kind of walk around the site until they find an artifact they connected with. They'd pick it up, look at it, put it back on the ground. And he says he never once in his life saw his dad take an artifact. Which I think is important, because that's saying, his dad modeled this for him.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, interesting. I'm still not like fully on board with this book yet, because I could see, this changing a lot. But he has a minor inaccuracy I picked up. He says archaeology cut off at 60 years. That's 50 years.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It's not a big deal, but, if you're going to write in print with authority about archaeology, then you should get little things like that right.
Yeah.
He does note that the lives of artifacts begin when they are created, which I thought was interesting, because that echoes the 9 lives of Florida's famous Key Marco cat.
Yeah.
And that was the whole premise for that book. That book, the Key Marco cat, didn't start when it was excavated or when it ended up in a museum. It started with the people who first gathered the materials and produced it and all that stuff.
Right.
Very interesting idea, interesting connection. And then we go into another story. And this is, again, I have it literally here. This is a bit of an odd story, maybe.
It's odd, and the way it starts off is really odd.
It's not reassuring the way it starts. So basically, in his 20s, he and a few people are running a survival camp sometimes, and when they're not doing the camp, they're going off into BLM federal land by themselves and kind of just exploring and
poking
living
around.
Yeah. And he was kind of there as the archaeology person. There is no indication in the book that he has formal training in archaeology, which is fine.
That's fine. But I was just, I was like, why is he even, why is that a thing on this trip? I mean, I could see because it's out there.
When you have the kids out there and then you're learning survival strategies and such and about plants and things, I could feel it being a pretty natural connection to some of that. But, whatever it is, that's what's the story being presented to us here. He talks a bit about under an outcropping they find a seashell this is in the Four Corners, Utah, Colorado area, so not close to the sea. So someone brought it here, so he knows he's on an archaeological site. And he does a little bit of actually pretty good description of trade routes and what this, I get a sense he has a very vivid imagination when he's talking about past people, and he's helping us imagine them. Not clear always on how much of that is factually based or how much it is just trying to imagine and connect with these people.
Yeah.
Which I'm not too worked up about in this book.
Sometimes and I can see value to both if it
right.
gets people interested in it and getting in the right ways.
Right.
That's fine. Creating a narrative can be beneficial as long as it's not too far-fetched.
Then one of the guys he's with starts collecting beads to clearly keep.
Yeah.
He challenges him a little bit, but he kind of doesn't fight it too hard. But he has a very nice quote at the end here. I watched the sun move outside, wishing I knew the words to put the beads back. Interesting. And also relatable. Right?
I get the feeling, obviously they're out doing a survivalist camp situation, but it's a little some of the language used. I get the sense that these were kind of, free-spirited people, I guess you would say. There's the guy was picking up the beads and he said, check this out, dead people.
Yeah.
And I just, in my mind, I read it in that voice too. But I was like, okay.
He's talking about local laws here. Or no, he's talking about ethics here. But he has a little bit about, what is right depending on local laws. And that's a little odd to bring in local laws to an ethics conversation because they're not the same thing.
Right, yeah.
So it kind of doesn't fit in this conversation right here. A conversation about where they overlap could be a different matter or don't. I did a lot of people seem inclined when they see something to pick it up, even if they don't want to keep it, they'll take it to a park ranger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he has handing it to a park ranger who is likely mystified as to why people keep grabbing objects and handing them in.
Right.
Like, that's 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
The park rangers we know are all like, I wish people would stop giving us these things and just leave them there.
Going back to, who owns objects, he had something in there that I highlighted. When the bloodlines that made the artifacts are long gone, as was arguably the case for the beads in the rock shelter, Cohen argues that there is a kind of continuity that makes the locality where the artifacts are found a stand-in for the owner. And I thought that was really interesting on multiple levels. First of all, the bloodlines are not necessarily gone, even if, we've talked about that over and over again in multiple
kind of says that, but seems to keep forgetting that.
Right, yeah. But also, I love the idea of, because we always talk about how context is important, and like the actual locality of the object becoming its owner is kind of an interesting concept.
And this is where he talks to the ethics journalist too, right?
Yeah.
And so this was interesting, yes, because the ethics journalist basically says I forget the name of the rule they said, but basically if you find a $20 bill on the street, you have no way of knowing who it could possibly belong to, so you are ethically fine to keep it. But if you find a wallet, you know who it belongs to and you can return it and you're ethically obligated to return it. His argument here, this is the journalist's argument, but I get a sense it's the author's argument too, is that because we know the culture that deposited this, we know who it belongs to.
Yeah.
Even if they aren't alive anymore, we know who it belongs to, and so we are ethically obligated to leave it where it is.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. Very interesting take to me. He keeps saying too much stuff isn't stored already, which isn't untrue, but I feel like he's a little too surface level for a lot of it, so far at least.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like him to talk a bit more. But yeah, the author says he specifically, if he finds a thing, he puts it where it came from, photo or drawing. And that's what we encourage people to do. I was interested to see him specifically say, this is what I do.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not doesn't feel, at this point, I'm feeling better because this doesn't feel like a secretly, I'm arguing for that looting is okay situation.
Yeah, correct.
This is a little more complicated here. We briefly come back to the group again with the story, and they find a surprisingly large cave. And he starts talking about archaeology and caves, which is pretty well done, I'd say. He does mention a man by name of Jack Harrelson, who he describes as an amateur archaeologist, which we kind of hate that word. Some people who are amateur archaeologists are like interested in and study it and work with archaeologists. And some people who use that word just mean we like to take
stuff
things.
up. Yeah.
And that is actually exactly what this person was.
Yep.
He was also a psycho because at one point they found bodies and had him in his garage. For whatever reason, he decided to remove the heads and bury them in his backyard.
Yeah. When I read that, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like,
and then he gets busted and is in prison, and later he goes to prison much longer because he hired a hitman to kill a bunch of people who ratted on him.
This is where I started reminiscing about like stealing history and some of the craziness that just seemed so outlandish. This has that same kind of vibe.
So then he says. Again, yeah, then he says basically he understands why this person is vilified when archaeology is not. But he keeps also sometimes pretending he doesn't know, which is weird. And he doesn't do that here necessarily, but it keeps happening. And then we're back with the friends and the outcropping. And this is interesting because they find a little shrine in the back of the cave, which is a pyramid pile of rocks, essentially. And there's rats making a nest in there. So one of the guys reaches his arm in to pull stuff out. And they kind of look at things, and then our author pulls the cap off the top so they can look in, and they pull out some things. And one guy the author only describes as the ugly man.
Right, which
I thought was kind of funny. He clearly doesn't like him. He said he had a physical altercation with this guy previously too.
Yeah.
He wants to keep the things. And the author this time fights really hard to put them back, ultimately claiming finders keepers. Basically, I found it, so I get to decide what happens with it. So they each take one of the little miniature bows that was inside to their like individual sleeping spots for the night, and then they put them back in the morning, but the author is confident that one is missing from the ugly man. And this story story ended up being just so fascinating because he at this point, he feels responsible. He's the one that uncapped it.
I mean, he is.
He is. Right.
And my thing is, and
he's not saying he's not, right?
Right.
He's saying he is coming to the realization here.
And here's the thing for me, and I know this is like him speaking about something that happened, however long ago when he was in his 20s. But if and maybe he didn't really, maybe he came to this conclusion as a result of this, but if you know that people have this, or you feel that people have this absolute desire to touch and hold things, don't take the cap off. Right. Just leave it alone. It's not going to hurt anybody if they never know that existed. You know what I'm saying? Like anybody in that group, their lives would have been completely fine if they didn't know about the miniature arrow or bows.
Here's how I read this story. To me, this reads as a group of people encountering this ethical dilemma for the first time and them trying to figure out how to navigate it and doing it imperfectly.
Right.
And I think that's what the author's telling us too, is that
I think it was a learning moment
do this
for
very
him.
well. Him and everyone else there, right?
Yeah.
And so actually, you're right. Yes. Why would you touch it? Please leave it alone. But also, like, now you, as our listeners, have heard us say this and talk about these things. The folks here in this situation, as far as we can tell, have never run into this before, and they're not sure how to deal with it. And so I thought the story did a pretty fantastic job of setting up this situation and helping us explore these connections and why. I was very enthusiastic about this chapter.
Another thing I noticed, and it again is a thing we hear quite often, is if we don't take it, somebody else will.
Which is something the author talks about a lot too.
Yeah, and that idea that you are protecting it by taking it.
Right.
And we hear that so often. And again, it's kind of a weak argument.
It's a very weak argument.
Yeah.
It was actually a quote from Lassie the monkey god, from the archaeologist there, is our actions shouldn't be dictated by the wrongdoing of others.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think is how it was basically phrased.
Yep.
So I really like this chapter, Barbara. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I was having a hard time getting over the fact that, like, and I understand the point of the story was because that was a learning, a point of, like, learning for him, but it just made me so mad because I feel like even as a 20-something, you should know better. But I know I'm coming at it from an archaeologist's perspective. Yeah,
I think that is the case here. And also, this would have been some time ago, like 80s or 90s probably.
Yeah, probably.
I'm not saying that this is above any critique, but the ideas he's exploring and how he's presenting them, I think I might even say right now, this is the all-time favorite chapter of everything we've read so far for me.
Interesting.
I am super interested in... So here's the thing, too. I fully expect and know now that this author will have things that I don't agree with, but I find a situation where I disagree with the author to be very invigorating and interesting if they are actually thinking about about these things.
Yeah.
The biggest issues I had with the looters presented in Stealing History is they're using the same tired old arguments. They haven't bothered to try to understand this stuff. I like to disagree with somebody and hear why they think the way they do and be able to understand that, even if it doesn't make me agree with them.
Well, and in this case, I feel like he's learning from his experiences, which I appreciate. He's
presenting himself as imperfect in this situation.
Yeah.
This is not him saying this is how things should happen.
Yeah.
He very explicitly says this with his hindsight writing this book.
I should have left it closed.
Shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have touched it. Shouldn't have reached in.
Yep.
We shouldn't have done these things.
Yeah.
So in the context of it, I really liked this. I think also a bit of a contrast to the introduction.
Oh, yeah.
Because the introduction, it felt like rage bait.
It really did. It was
weird.
After I read the first chapter, I was like, wait, was this like written by the same person? Yeah. I had to go back and like see if maybe the introduction was written by somebody else, and it wasn't.
And this is so thoughtful. And like I said, he's not presenting this is the answer. He's like, this is a possible answer.
Yeah.
All right. So our next chapter, chapter 2, the Destiny Jar. This is him exploring a bit more, I think, about what is the cost of things being removed, even in an archaeological context. And again, I liked this.
Yeah, this one was pretty good. I did like the fact that we kind of go back to Honduras for a brief period and in better in a better context for us as readers.
He does a good job. So basically the thrust of this chapter is he understands that archaeology is good and necessary, but he also feels a certain loss when things are removed, because to him, the thing being in the place is a part of the connection. And when it's taken out of that connection, it doesn't have that anymore. It doesn't have the meaning to him anymore. And I thought that's an interesting take. And so he feels conflicted. And again, he's not necessarily presenting an answer like we shouldn't be doing archaeology. He's just like, what is the cost of collecting things in archaeology? He continues to have zero patience for pot hunters, which I appreciate, though. He has another side story here where he is in a small town in Arizona and comes across a display that just said these things were found in Arizona, and it's a bunch of clearly looted artifacts that basically someone got too old for and gave to the place, and like, we don't know what to do with this.
Which, again, is something we see quite often.
All the time.
And it reminded me of the instance we had of somebody leaving artifacts on the doorstep of our main office in Pensacola. And for the context, he just put the state in which they came from. And we were like, well, that's useless. So it's kind of like the similar, like, these were found in Arizona. Cool story.
Right. And so the author feels like he knows the ceramic styles well enough and the terrain well enough that he knows an appropriate, in the moment, I want to say, he feels like he knows the appropriate place to take it to. So he actually breaks in and steals one of these.
I know, which I was like, oh no.
Well, again, I feel like he's not advocating for this, because as the story goes on, like he's stolen it, and later on he's traveling to the place or a place to deposit it, and he's having doubts about what he's done.
But he stole it with the intention of like returning it to where he felt it it belonged, essentially.
Right.
Even if he didn't know the exact spot it came from, he felt like he knew the environment from which it came from. And I get that sentiment. And it kind of reminded me of like a caged animal wanting to set like a caged animal free.
Well, and again, though, he made it, this is again him talking in retrospect of this story. He's not saying I did a good thing. He's saying in the moment he was convinced, but even while he was traveling to the site, he comes to realize that this is actually not okay.
Yeah.
It's actually, frankly, I found the introspection fascinating here. He says, wherever I left the vessel, it would say a hell of a lot more about me and my ideal than it would about the lives of the people who made it.
Yep.
Good intentions or not, I now felt like a looter. Oh, and he also said that he was imposing his own desires on the situation. So he wasn't actually making it any better by doing this.
Yeah, he even says somewhere in there, like, he kind of just mucked it up even more, potentially.
Which the story, like, again, that's not a story I want to hear, but as a story for illustrating, like, what is the cost? How do we solve this? Here's a extremely flawed way I tried to solve this once, and it was a terrible idea.
Right.
He does such a good job, I feel like.
Yeah. I did when he was talking about repatriation, because I mean, that's kind of what he was trying to do in a very informal sense, you know. So the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, as it's often called, is a law that was enacted in 1990, and it requires that museums, other institutions like universities and things like that, return human remains and funerary objects to the appropriate tribal entity. And of course, that's very complicated, as you can imagine. But he had an analogy that I thought was really great for just looting and NAGPRA and like this whole mess that we've kind of created on a, like his story is kind of an analogy for this big mess we've created. And he said it feels like trying to pick up after a war while the war is still going on. And I was like, yeah. I hadn't really thought about some of the things that were returned to the tribes were funerary or ceremonial items that they would still use in ceremonies once they were returned.
Or even if not, they were handling them before they were buried again or something.
And not out of malice, but just out of doing the appropriate, what they thought at the time was the appropriate thing. A lot of the conservation treatments that were used on these objects were actually toxic.
We learned about those with the key Marco cat as well.
Yeah. And one of the things that they sometimes would do is when they were done with an object, they would throw it in the water to bring it back to the earth, essentially. And they were like, we can't do that because it's toxic. We don't want to throw toxic things in the water. They shouldn't be, like,
museum staff would handle with
gloves
and masks
yeah.
and stuff. It's that toxic. And here they were, again, without malice, but repatriating it and then failing to mention that, oh, yeah, by the way.
Right. And I don't know if maybe the museums and other institutions didn't realize that the tribes would be utilizing these objects again, so I
didn't even get the idea that they're necessarily utilizing, but they were handling them without that equipment, and that was the real problem.
Yeah, but it's like, again, like his little pot that he took out trying to do good and trying to make things better. It's just created kind of another mess.
He hasn't fixed anything.
Yeah.
And that's what he's also realizing too, yeah. He says at the end, when he returns the pot, "Robin Hood, my butt. I felt I was making more of a mess out of the already intractable situation. By picking it up and bringing it here, I had claimed the jar as my own. The only thing this theft and return stunt did was make me more uncertain about how to strike a balance."
I like this chapter. I like the analogy that he kind of set up and everything. And yeah, it's a mess. I mean, as an archaeologist, I can tell you, and I'm sure Tristan can tell you as well, it's a hot mess.
Right.
And one of the things that I think archaeologists also have to deal with is the misdoings, the misdeeds of previous archaeologists from generations past, and trying to undo the wrongdoings there as well. Archaeology as a discipline has changed and become more scientific. We've also become more aware of how what we do affects others, including tribes. And so it's very complicated. And I do think the author does a really, really good job of kind of parsing that out. It's a hot mess. But I really like the analogy about the war, trying to clean up while the war is going on. That is essentially what we are doing.
All right. So on to chapter 3, titled Treasure Hunters. So the author says he belongs to a group of relic hunters, which I'm still a little concerned about this book at this point, and that rang some alarm bells.
Yeah, and I've noticed throughout he uses like the words treasure and relics and things like that we do not care for.
We don't care for, but I understand that he would.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's okay. But it turns out this group of relic hunters is just about finding the places, kind of like we talked about with his father before, like kind of connecting with it and then leaving things as they are. And that leaving things as they are is kind of an important part of the process, which if that's what everybody did, I feel like we'd be in a much better situation.
Right.
We as archaeologists are not necessarily excited about this, but I'm not going to raise a fuss considering all the other problems we've got going on. He does tell a story of one trip in particular, and this is a kind of, some of it's him showing he's learned some lessons here, because they come across a metate and a pot under a outcropping, and he and the guy he's with has an argument about what to do about it. The guy he's with is like, we need to move it to a safe place, and he's very vehemently against moving it at all.
Right.
And he ultimately claims finders keepers, like I get to decide what happens here. So the guy decides he's going to put a rock covering it, and the author says it just makes it more obvious, which it absolutely would.
Right.
There's no way that would be less than obvious. Finally, the author's wife rejoins them, and she finds, it's actually being held together by the sand, so it's already been broken, and if we tried to move it, it's just going to shatter. The guy was like, well, he wants to cover it again, and apparently his wife puts her foot down and says, absolutely not. So they leave it with the rock nearby, and I liked the phrasing, the mark was left, a mark of the dispute, now part of the story. Like, fascinating.
Well, my thing is too, I get like, oh my gosh, we saw it so other people could see it and they might steal it. Again, it's that same argument in a different setting.
In his defense here, the guy doesn't want to keep it.
Right.
He just wants to move it to somewhere less obvious. But the author, I think, I really appreciate, he's like, absolutely not.
And
no way.
It's been sitting there for however long and it's been just fine. So just leave it.
Yeah. I think like them, they almost certainly come across a lot of, actually, they say they do come across a lot of stuff that's been looted and destroyed. And so I can see that urgency might be a little more prominent, but I'm glad this turned out the way it did. I'm glad the author demonstrated him having learned lessons.
Yeah.
That's very well done. So it's a short chapter. I like that one. The last chapter for this episode, we are going to talk about the unseen things. And this is another story. This one I actually have I'm not on board with the author on this one. So they have a reporter join their relic hunter group, and he and the reporter comes across it's
like a cliff dwelling.
Or some structure, basically.
If you're familiar with it, they're in the area where like the Anasazi were, Mesa Verde, all of that stuff. So to give you some geographical and cultural context.
And so they kind of look around things. There's been signs of looting, signs of excavation, because archaeologists realized it was being looted, kind of a deal. And they find in the floor a stone that's capping essentially a cellar, I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And the journalist is like, what do we, do we move it? And he says she has finders keepers, so she gets to decide.
Which is a made-up rule.
It's a made-up rule, but it's a rule that's, I guess, served him well in how it's been treated before. But here's where I don't like this. The story in which one had the chapter 1? Well, I said these are a group of people trying to figure out how to navigate the situation. Here, the journalist is trying to figure out how to navigate the situation. He has already thought about this. He has the answers.
Right.
He won't tell her anything because he doesn't want to impose his ethics on her. And I think he has an obligation to tell her what he thinks. Maybe not tell her what she must do, but tell her what he thinks because of that.
And because she's a reporter, like she's going to report on this. This was in my mind, speaking as obviously a public archaeologist, this was an opportunity for him to not only educate her, but also potentially educate other people, which I guess it kind of did work out.
Right.
But
and I get
there was no guarantee of that.
Not wanting to push your ethics on somebody, but that's not what this is.
Right.
This is, and he literally like refused to tell her what to do or what he thinks and leaves to let her decide.
Yeah.
And like, you ran away.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
You ran away from you had a responsibility here to at least tell her what you think or make sure she's considering the consequences of moving this.
Right. And it was just...
I was not happy with that. I'm not angry with the book or the author at this point, but I pretty strongly disagree with
I felt
this.
like you said, like he was running away from his responsibilities. I feel like if he really, truly cared about these places and these things, and then he would have at least told her what he would have done.
Right.
So that she could consider that. Like if you want to, I get wanting to teach someone through allowing them the opportunity to make their own decisions and, to deal with the consequences, whatever those may be. But if you really care about the site and the archaeology, you understand what's at stake. I think you have an obligation to at least let your opinion be known.
Yeah. Or at least make sure she is considering, like he is talking about what is lost when things are moved here.
Right.
Make sure she's considering that when she's making her decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not angry with the author, but I do not agree with the author in this case. And like I said before, that doesn't mean I dislike the book, because the book is making me think. And I'm really enjoying this overall. So yeah, that ends us for this episode. And I gotta say, I'm really enjoying this book. It's not perfect. I have critiques and there's things I don't agree with, but I like how the author is exploring certain ideas and not necessarily presenting a definitive answer for everything, but talking about the conflict he feels over some of these situations.
Yeah, I don't think I'm quite as enthusiastic about the book as you are. I understand why you are, and I feel the same way. But I think I just sometimes end up feeling frustrated by the author. But of course, I'm looking at it through a biased lens, right? I am an archaeologist. I am a professional. I know things this author may not know. But because of that, I just tend to get frustrated.
Yeah, I don't know that we know things he may not know is an excuse, because if you're writing things down in a book, you are open yourself up to judgment about what you write.
That's true.
And so I think it's perfectly fair to call him out on things that are incorrect and things he doesn't know.
That last chapter just really rubbed me the wrong way.
I mean, that wasn't even like an archaeological situation. That was a basic ethical situation, and neither of us thinks he handled that well.
Right.
And I think what bothers me more about that situation than previous ones in the book so far is he didn't present that as, and here's what I learned from this, here's why I should have done differently. He presents that as like the peak of his ethical growth. And I think it was still very, very flawed, and he doesn't seem to recognize it in the book at least. But like I said, I am enjoying what he's saying enough that even when I disagree with him, I can really enjoy disagreeing with him.
Yeah.
But I don't dislike him. I think I would love to sit down and chat with this guy, honestly.
Maybe. I don't know how much of a tolerance I would have for that.
I would have to see. It could be very different, of course, but I feel like there could be some interesting conversations for sure. Anyway, that wraps us up this time. Maybe not quite as short as we'd planned at the start of this episode, but we will also be releasing an episode in the middle of the month as we planned. and that will be chapters 5 through 8, not the entire section 2, because section 2 is extremely long.
It's a doozy.
So we're going to split up that one a little bit to the following episodes as well. So until then, we'll see you all next time.
Happy reading, everybody.
Archaeology Books for Fun is brought to you by the Florida Public Archaeology Network, a program of the University of West Florida. You can find out more about archaeology and about FPAN at fpan.us. We appreciate any feedback, so if you're listening to us as a podcast, please leave us a review, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.